Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy Heroes. We're back with a talk video, and GL Leia Organa has her kit reveal. So we're going to do our standard stuff here. The developer insights and strategy tips, take a look at those. Then break down and analyze what we're seeing in the kit. See if we can extract some clues for what I think is going to be happening with it. And then take a look at this potential squad options. Look at the pool of characters. I think in this case, though, it is fairly straightforward what we are going to be using. And then the gearing of my roster, that's now a separate video. I did say that was going to be about every 2 weeks, which would be this week, except we are only a week away from Malicos being added in game, so we're going to do it next week. That way we'll have a little bit more substance for what we will be doing during that period. This one would have been fairly light, and I think we'll get a lot more out of it next week. With Leia, we get a rebel tank leader. Within her attributes, what we are seeing here is an offensive powerhouse as they characterize her, but they word this conditionally for offense only, which may imply she'll be easily countered on defense. Probably means that AI will play her incorrectly, and as we go through the kit, that's going to become more and more apparent. All abilities will be conditionally based on enemy roles. This is not untrue, but I think it's overstated. Empowers rebel allies through various stat boosts, prevents all cooldown manipulation. That's going to mean Cat can't get a first turn force leap in counters, and she's a non-taunting tank. Enemies will need to prioritize her because of her mechanics. The strategy tips portion here, they reiterate she's better on offense and the role-based mechanics. Choosing the right target will have an effect, which means if you don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of everyone's roles, this could be hard to manage, and it makes sense why she's better on offense. AI will be more likely to mismanage this, although I think there's going to be a smaller pool of counters for us to remember all the various roles. Leia is going to heal the squad based on the damage she takes. Tactical offensive called out as needing careful management to employ properly. Lots of out of turn attacks, and call to action is going to be a key component to ultimate charge, but this is also a little overstated. Not too much, but a little. Strap yourselves in for this one. There's a lot of little details. I got a lot to say, and we're going to break this down into little bitty parts, and it's going to take us a little bit of time. So the basic ability, Righteous Retribution. This is physical damage to the target enemy. Rebel allies gain retribution. This condition alone is going to be super powerful. A non-conditional squad AoE retribution on basic, and they already said this squad is going to have a lot of out-of-turn attacks without even looking at the rest of the kit. I'm expecting retribution to always be up, especially if you want to be prioritizing attacking her. That means as you attack her, she's going to get retribution, she's going to counter and keep the retribution up and keep spreading retribution as you attack her. So it's going to become a major nuisance where it's just going to be there unless you have buff immunity. On her turn, deal bonus true damage to the target equal to 10% of the damage other rebel allies received since Leia's last turn, and deal additional role-based effects. And pay particular attention to these role-based effects. I think these are the most important ones to understand, because with a basic ability, these are single target, and we have to actually make a choice here. Now with attackers, that's dispel enemy buffs and reduce their speed by 5, maxing out at 200 per buff until the end of the encounter. This is going to be specifically powerful against buff heavy squads like JML, JMK, who tend to have a number of attackers like your JKLs, Cats, JKRs. Against debuff heavy squads, I may opt not to target the attackers since they're not going to have as many buffs, and that means the effects of the basic ability here are going to be a little bit mitigated. Against healer support characters, this is going to be an AoE cleanse of the rebel allies, equalize health and protection with the weakest other rebel ally, then recover 20% health and protection. With this ability, we get a mechanic that will be stronger at counting those debuff heavy Sith and Empire factions with a nice easy cleanse, but this will be good against any squad for the heal depending on the timing. We just got to keep it in mind, save it for a good moment. No, not really save it, it's a basic ability, you know what I mean. Now with tanks, rebel allies, mass assist, limit once per turn, and reduce the target enemy's max health by 5% per rebel ally until the end of the encounter. Now this is potentially very powerful, but context contingent. I might be more likely to use this option against dark side squads where going after the attacker, I've already mentioned, I think is going to be less impactful. I do want to make one note of this because it sounds like in game modes like Conquest with certain data discs like Perseverance, this may not function, this portion here up against tanks, since this is going to limit the mass assists. That means discs that increase the amount of mass assists might just lose their efficacy. So it's just something to keep in mind, not a big deal. The first special ability, Rebel Ambush. This is a 4-turn cooldown ability. Physical damage plus bonus true damage equal to 10% of Leia's max health. Remove 20% turn meter, and if they don't already have ambush, then inflict a stack of ambush on the target enemy until the end of their next turn. This portion here screams mod her for health with health primaries to maximize her damage output. The turn meter removal is going to help with the ambush mechanics. Rebel allies gain 10% mastery and 25% potency stacking until the end of the encounter. Potency will help mechanics throughout this kit and others, in particular the burning mechanics of Drogon and R2, but this isn't the feature of this ability. More of a nice side benefit, making them more of a threat as the battle goes on each time this ability gets used. AoE inflict role-based debuffs. This is going to be undispellable. Attackers will get dazed, healer support characters staggered, tanks buff immunity. Each of these are going to be very sensible based on their role. This is much more powerful than just an AoE daze or stagger. Instead, giving them these role-based debuffs, in most cases, is going to inflict them with a debuff that is going to impact their role the most. Attackers typically compound their effect with out-of-turn attacks. This is going to shut down those out-of-turn attacks, and with characters like Bosch or Cat, that's going to minimize their efficacy a little bit. Healer support characters need to take their turns in order to do their heals or cleanses. With stagger, you're delaying their ability to execute those abilities, and tanks, obviously they need to taunt. By having buff immunity, you're mitigating their ability to play their role as a tank. So, but this is again a nice side benefit, not the feature. The feature is going to be ambush, but what is, and the thing that I said about role-based abilities up at the top with the basic ability, why I think these are a little overstated. With an AoE ability like this, like yes, there are going to be role-based effects, but you don't need to manage them that much when it's an AoE. The AoE itself is going to do the work, whereas the basic ability, you need to make an actual choice. But one thing that is nice is by understanding the various different debuffs, then you don't have to know the roles as much. You can just see who has which debuff, and then that will indicate what role, in case with a basic ability you can target who you want. Now the feature of the first special ability is the ambush mechanic. With ambush, that's minus 50% speed, gain an additional stack upon receiving damage, and at 6 stacks of ambush, lose all stacks and gain ambushed until the end of the encounter. With ambushed, it's that minus 50 speed, maxing at minus 50. Protection is disabled, immune to protection up, and bonus protection. So once ambush gets applied, you will want to focus in on that character quickly. The speed reduction is going to help that, and once you get those 6 stacks, then the protection and protection up shutdown becomes the big feature. Then each time this ability gets used, ambush can spread. This is going to severely hurt squads like Jabba and JMK. It's going to be a very effective counter up against that damage over time, protection up Datacron for Lord Vader. When we see that again, ambush will be extremely effective. And what's nice about this ability is it's less conditional conditional. It will work regardless of who you target, although it may be best to disable the protection on a high priority character like a taunting tank or a high impact attacker like a Commander Ahsoka Tano. First. The second special ability, this is tactical offensive. This is another 4-turn cooldown ability, and this is the one that was mentioned in the strategy tips portion to be careful about its use. Target other ally, cleanse all debuffs, and remove 100% turn meter. Deal AoE physical damage plus bonus true damage increased by 1% per turn meter removal from the target other ally. This is nice, but keep in mind this portion here won't work against JMK since he prevents turn meter manipulation. So the turn meter removal and bonus damage won't work in that counter, although there's several other aspects that are going to be very strong up against JMK. Remove call to action from all allies, then all rebel allies gain call to action for 4 turns and 10% max health stacking until the end of the encounter. So how long this lasts and the cooldown match up perfectly. So the idea should be that this hangs around until the next time this ability can be reapplied, unless an ability block or something like that happens. On their next turn, the target other ally gains 50% offense for their next ability, and if it is their basic ability, they gain an additional 2% offense for each percent of turn meter removed, and ignore protection for that ability. If the target ally defeats an enemy during their next turn, they gain 50% turn meter. Target other ally gains stealth and 150 speed for 1 turn. This is all just for the benefit of Drogon. Turn order is going to be critical. Leia has to go fast and first so that this can be her first move to target Drogon, remove his turn meter, and give him all of these bonuses so that when he uses his basic ability, his kit also gives him a bunch of other offensive stats when he uses his basic on his first turn, and that this is going to help this ability here to have that one-shot impact for Drogon that they're building. And this is why CG is saying in the strategy tips to look at how you use this ability. Everything is pointing towards Captain Drogon. Now, the last part here, inflict role-based debuffs. This helps, it's a nice feature, but what I'm most interested here are the tank debuffs, because the defense down and vulnerable may be intended to help Drogon one-shot who he is intended to eliminate, at least in certain matchups. That's going to have much more of an impact on who Drogon targets than the other ones. Like attackers getting those abilities, sure, that does something. The healers support, losing some potency, tenacity down, sure. But defense down and vulnerable is going to directly help Drogon one-shot somebody potentially. The unique ability, Forever Our Princess. At the start of the battle, R2-D2 gains 75% max health, protection, offense, and potency until the end of the battle. Stealth for 1 turn, and assists whenever Leia uses a special ability, dealing 50% more damage. And the damage R2 receives is decreased by 20%, and rebel allies recover 10% health whenever R2 attacks out of turn. Now there's a lot here. Huge R2 specific stat boost that when you take into account R2 Zetas equates into a big squad stat boost. The stat boost itself is made even more effective by the reduced damage received, and the stealth means you can't target him and increases the chance that he can use burning right away and not be affected by ability blocks or stuns. He's going to be pretty easy to make pretty fast as well, and the damage boost on Leia assists could get deadly, but the health recovery takes a couple already robust characters and makes them even more survivable. If all allies are rebels at the start of her turn and each enemy's turn, Leia gains Fearless if she didn't have it until she receives damage. Whenever an enemy turn ends while Leia has Fearless, she gains 2% max health. All enemies lose 5% mastery and 15% defense and tenacity until the end of the encounter, and Leia gains 4% ultimate charge. Now this portion of the unique is why CG said up top she's a non-taunting tank that you'll want to prioritize, because if you are not targeting her, that means Fearless is going to remain on her and she's going to become more survivable, and the enemy or you are going to have your mastery and your defense reduced, because if Fearless remains on her, those effects occur. And that's why it's also going to be beneficial to protect her with some taunting tanks so that the enemy cannot attack Leia and get rid of Fearless. While she has Fearless, at the end of each of her turns, non-Scoundrel Rebel allies gain 5% mastery stacking until the end of the encounter, and Leia gains 4% ultimate charge. Leia can't gain Fearless if she has a taunt effect. So other than the ult charge details that we'll speak to in a bit, it's the non-Scoundrel Rebel ally stacking mastery condition that starts shrinking the Rebel pool, and why we're going to start wanting to pair her with very specific characters to make sure we are getting the maximal benefit out of this unique ability. At the start of her turn, all other Rebel allies recover health equal to 100% of the damage Leia received since her last turn. If their health was 100%, they recover this amount of protection instead. So now we get another domino of how Leia is going to become more and more of a nuisance and be much more effective. This creates essentially a catch-22 situation where if you surround her with tanks, and when we get to the leadership ability, it's going to be much clearer why Jedi tanks become the best option. But if you surround her with tanks, that means Fearless is going to be on Leia. You're not going to be able to get rid of Fearless easily unless you can ignore taunt or you have AoE abilities. So then you are forced into going after these taunting tanks. And in that situation, the damage you do on them is going to be a little bit offset because you're going to be trying to hit Leia. You want to hit Leia, otherwise Fearless is going to get out of control. So you're trying to find ways to do both. And as you hit Leia, you're going to be healing the tanks, making them more difficult to take out. But if you go after the tanks directly and try to ignore Leia, then you're allowing Fearless to go unchecked, have the stacking stats and the diminishing stats of defense from your own characters while the ultimate is charging because of Fearless. And Fearless helps the ultimate charge much faster. So you are put into this very difficult situation of who and what to attack because of the details of this unique ability. Whenever a Rebel attacker or Rebel support ally is dazed, they gain bonus protection of 100%. Whenever an enemy is ambushed, all Rebel allies gain foresight, and whenever a Jedi Rebel tank uses an ability on their turn, Leia assists. So this compounds the benefit of why Old Ben and Kanan Jarrus, as the only two options for Jedi Rebel tanks, start making a lot of sense. As they take their turns, then Leia is going to assist, which means that retribution is spreading more, and you can be going after one of those role-based characters to have Leia inflict the effects from the basic ability. So you can be increasing the amount of times Leia is contributing those role-based effects of either the cleanse or of the stacking speed reduction on the attackers or going after those tank characters. Now the Fearless component, what that does, if you leave it on Leia, all allies are going to be immune to expose and fear, and all allies have plus 50% offense and tenacity. So leaving it on Leia means that the team is going to be much more dangerous. So all these reasons to try and focus in on Leia so that Fearless and the ultimate and all these effects can be lessened a little bit, and buy yourself some time if you were to happen to face this on defense. Second unique ability, Galactic Legend. This unit takes, we're not going to even read through this one, you can read it if you want. This is some standard GL stuff. We're just going to keep it moving. This is a big enough kit to rehash some of the particulars of some pretty standard stuff. I don't even know if this is completely different or the same, if there's some little nuances. It's not a big deal regardless. The leadership ability, I know. We're going to start with the bottom portion. Allies and enemies are immune to cooldown manipulation. So we're going to say this up top and not the end, so not to interrupt some of the other things that are going to be going on here. Plus, this is a portion that we've already talked about. This is going to be particularly effective against JMK and Cat. It means force sleep doesn't happen first turn. All rebel allies have plus 40 speed. Non-scoundrel rebel attackers gain 25% mastery and 50% max health and max protection. Jedi rebel tanks gain 100% defense for 2 turns start of the encounter, and whenever they gain taunt, they gain 50% protection up and deal bonus true damage equal to 20% of their max health whenever using a basic ability with protection up. So we get another boost for Drogon, more boost for Jedi tanks, essentially cementing those final 2 slots, and you're probably going to want to double check the modding on those characters. I'm sure I probably have defense on those characters, probably means I'm going to be modding them for health so that they can get maximal impacts from the bonus true damage when they use their basic abilities, because we're going to want to increase the amount of damage output on this squad when we have so many tanks on the field, at least potentially. Rebel allies take 25% reduced damage from out of turn attacks and are immune to max health reduction and plague. Whenever enemies attack out of turn, non-scoundrel rebel allies gain 1% mastery stacking until the end of the counter. At the start of each rebel ally's turn, AoE, Dispel, Foresight, and Stealth. So the mechanics, some mechanics here that ensure Marin can't stop them, but also reduce the impact of JML, JMK, Jabba teams, these teams that have a lot of assists, although Jabba still has a better shot because they start out the match not assisting. But even the trade-off of characters, like with JMK, where you don't get the turn meter impact, so that means Drogon isn't going to have as much offensive output up against JMK. Now we see that evened out a little bit, where all those out of turn attacks from JMK are going to be reduced a lot, evening the playing field between those 2 squads. Whenever enemies with less than 100% turn meter gain bonus turn meter, rebel allies gain 100% crit avoidance stacking, and Empire enemies can't gain bonus turn meter. Whenever a rebel ally has their turn meter reduced, they can't have their turn meter reduced again for 1 turn. And whenever an enemy is revived, all rebel allies gain 10% turn meter. So throughout this kit, we're just getting a bunch of little conditions that help one match or another. We see some here. Some of this works against JML or JMK, some works against Jabba, some things up against Rey and SLKR. Lots of little things adding up. The particulars of who is benefiting, who is not in one situation or another, not as relevant. Enemies inflicted with burning from a rebel ally can't recover health, and if burning is dispelled on an enemy, they take 20% of their max health as damage. Whenever a rebel ally inflicts an enemy with burning, they gain damage immunity. And the first time a non-scoundrel rebel ally loses all of their protection, they gain second wind for 3 turns. And second wind is the first time this character would be reduced to 1% health, dispel the buff, and they recover 50% health and protection instead. This might just be recency bias, but this kit is feeling far stronger than previous GLs. You can start seeing how she's going to be an offensive powerhouse. Plus with second wind, remember the basic ability with Leia. After second wind triggered, this is probably a good time to target a healer or support character on the enemy team with either Leia or one of the Jedi Rebel tanks, so that if the Jedi Rebel tanks attack a healer support character, Leia assists, there's going to be some healing that occurs on top of any cleansing, which will help boost the results of second wind, where the character might be at 50% health and protection, but suddenly they're boosted up right away. The ultimate ability, these are my friends, gain 4% ultimate charge whenever an enemy's turn or Leia's turn ends while Leia has a stack of Fearless. We already saw this part. And 1% whenever a rebel ally deals damage while they have call to action. And we said during the tactical offensive ability that they're probably going to have they're going to have call to action almost all the time. Now, what this ability is going to do is AoE true damage equal to 30% of Leia's max health, 90% against enemies who are ambushed, and remove 100% turn meter AoE inflict ambush on those who didn't have it, and if all allies are rebels, AoE fracture until the end of Leia's next turn or she is defeated. So here we get another data point of why she is going to be one of those health mod characters with health primaries. Even the speed arrow, probably a health primary arrow with as much speed secondaries as you can. Those are very helpful mods to have. I know I have a good one on Grievous that I might look at taking off. Now, the portion of this portion is the critical component here. So, and it may impact how and when you want to use the ultimate, since the more characters who are ambushed, the better. Or if you happen to be at a situation where you get max charge and a character might be 1, 2, 3 stacks away from ambush converting into ambushed, you might want to wait to make sure that you get the biggest impact from using the ultimate ability. So what is going to happen is when These Are My Friends is used, when the ultimate is used, the characters are going to either be eliminated or be extremely close to near death. They're all going to be fractured, they're going to be slowed down, they're not going to have any turn meter, and that's going to put you in a situation where the ambush that then lands on all the characters, you have a prime opportunity to convert all of those ambushes into ambushed, locking it down that those characters can't get protection or protection up, creating a situation for a very easy cleanup. Like, this feels to me almost like a ship ultimate, where it goes off and the battle is essentially over except for that cleanup duty, instead of previous Geo ultimates where in most cases they can maybe turn the tide, but they're not always a win condition. Like, this is a win condition the way that I'm reading and interpreting it. And we're not even done with this whole thing. There's even more in here, because there is also this component of all rebel allies are going to recover 100% health and protection and gain tenacity up for 3 turns, and all other rebel allies are going to gain speed, which is going to be good because it's going to help them make sure you convert the ambushes into ambushed. And if this ability defeats an enemy, revive all defeated rebel allies and they recover full health and protection. All non-scoundrel rebel allies gain mastery until the end of the counter, and other rebel allies gain additional speed. Really, really powerful ultimate. I think it's quite a bit different than what we are used to seeing with Galactic Legend characters. Before we get to the squads, you can see here that the game update has gone live because we have Leia here, which means I was unhappy with the footage that we recorded last night, so we are redoing it now. But because the update has gone live, that means we have the gear that we can break down, which I always like to do when it is available. And with Leia, this is a tough character, starting at gear level 7, and this is highly unusual. Carbantes are not unheard of, very rare at gear level 7, but they do happen on occasion. Usually it's HoloLenses, but what's really unusual is a set of Chirotechs. And that is an indicator of things to come. I looked at Jabba, Lord Vader, just to double check that maybe some other recent GLs had Chirotechs. Not the case. This is the first time that I recall that this has ever occurred. Gear level 8, we see additional Carbantes, 1 with a stun gun, 2 stun cuffs, and 2 more sets of Chirotechs. That's already a lot of Chirotechs getting through gear 8. Gear level 9, more of the same, with 2 more sets of Chiros, another stun gun, 2 more Carbantes, and stun cuffs. Gear level 10, we get another set of Chirotechs, and we're seeing a stun gun, and that means another Carbante. So we are looking at 6 sets of Chirotech. So that's 300 of each of the Chiro computers and Chiro prods, which is extremely expensive to get to gear level 11. But at 11, we get a little bit of a breath where there's no Chiros here, no Carbantes, just an eyeball, a med pack, and a neurosav here. And all of this is much more manageable. But as we get to gear 12 and the finisher, we see a bunch of med packs. We are looking at 4 sets of med packs, and we are looking at the Chiroprod here as the finisher, which is the more in demand of the two, which means it's consumed at a higher rate and a little bit harder to accumulate. So in total, that's 400 of the Chiro shock prods, 300 of the Chiro computers, 400 Carbantis, and 150 stun guns. So be prepared in advance. This is going to be a gear-heavy Galactic Legend, which is what you would expect, but this is still a lot. Now for the squad synergies, this is pretty straightforward. I think there's not going to be a lot of flexibility here unless we get new characters in the future. I think these spots are primarily spoken for, but we're going to talk a little bit about why I don't think certain characters are going to work, because that is part of the conversation a little bit. Now the other designated spots that are non-negotiable is Drogon. You don't get the one-shot functionality without him, and it is going to be R2 because the burning synergy that exists within them, but really more because of the stat share and the stat boost, especially how that is going to pair with the number crunch Zeta, which is going to allow R2 to share a lot of those stats to the rest of the squad. Plus, if you have the combat analysis Zeta, that's another dispel potential. With the other two slots, the first of the Jedi tanks is very obvious. It's going to be Old Ben. Most of us already have him at Relics. He's already a good tank. He has a taunt that is a little bit more persistent and annoying, which is going to pair very well with Leia. And the other one, there's only one option to choose from here, and that is going to be Kanan Jarrus. So he is somebody to start prepping if you are working towards Leia. You should do it anyway for the Profundity fleet to increase the quality of the Ghost, but he is going to slot in this spot. He's going to help out with a little bit, but his kit's a little softer. Maybe we'll see an Omicron or something to improve him down the line, but I think out the gate, this is what we can expect. We could opt for a single tank. I think there's going to be a lot of reasons to have dual tanks, but the reason you don't want to use some of these other tank options is because they lose a lot of that Jedi synergy, where there's going to be extra stat share and really the Leia assist. So when you look at characters like Scarif, Rebel Pathfinder, K2SO, Chopper, a lot of these other tank options like Baze, what you are losing from the battle is not offset by what they are contributing. One character that we should acknowledge though, because CG did have a post the other day talking about how there were some unintended interactions with Saw Gerrera. This hasn't been fixed yet, so we should probably explore it. I think it's probably with one of his special abilities, like with the rocket launcher blast here. There's some turn meter removal and some offense reduction stacking that I think probably could pair well with Leia to increase her efficacy a little bit. With characters like CLS, I don't think there's any reason to add him. Yes, he has call to action, but call to action, as we said throughout the kit breakdown, I think is going to be pretty persistent on the squad unless it's interrupted for a turn by like an ability block. So it's very unlikely that CLS is going to be contributing anything more. They did have in today's update that Chupio's kit has been adjusted so that he's only going to have full functionality if Leia is not present or a GL is not present. So utilizing him is not going to have any benefit. So we got to look at some other characters. Like we could look at Jin, who has a turn swap that could be useful, and there's an options like we could look at Leia with her Ami, but the Ami is basically a little redundant to what Leia is already providing, so Leia doesn't become a strong option. So when you start breaking down all these characters, sure, some of them might offer one thing or another, but they don't contribute more than what Kanan Jarrus is going to be contributing in this matchup. So he's definitely the one that I think is going to be utilized unless we get another character in the future at some point. Before we wrap up, a couple quick thoughts on the update notes. Princess Nisa is on a light side 80 energy node. I was kind of thinking at one point it was going to be Cantina because of other things, but that's not terrible, not great, kind of expected. Endor Escalation Tier 3 is what I really want to acknowledge here, because this is something I had been waiting on, and now we have clarity about it. Over on the SWGOH Events Discord server, SIG put this out with the data mine, so now we have an idea of what the rewards are going to be. We don't know all the details though, and I think some of that's going to be very important, but I was waiting for this because as I do like roster reviews over on Twitch and I'm trying to help players decide between Jabba or Leia, one of the things that I've been cautioning about for players to choose Jabba right now, because there was a lot of reason to go after Jabba, but you saw the effect of Jabba with Smuggler's Run 2, how desirable those micro attenuators are. And with us knowing that Endor Escalation Tier 3 was coming, understanding what that relationship with Leia could end up being, could tip the scales into her being highly desirable. And I think that's what we're seeing here. But with the details that we're missing is we don't know if there's like buckets here, because there could be chances to get all of these things, or within some of those buckets we could have a situation. I was explaining this over on Discord. It could be a situation where it's Gerda keypads and droid brains, or it's a situation where it's Gerda keypads or droid brains. And in that situation, that's a huge difference, because if it's a situation where you might get one or the other, that is not as ideal of a situation where you have a chance to get both in every payout. So there's those types of things that I'm always kind of paying attention to. But in general, this is what I was hoping to see. I was actually hoping to see one of these or the other, like see this being an event where we could get Omicrons or have a chance at circuit boards or some relic materials. I was not expecting it to be an event where we'd be getting both of those things or had a chance at both of those things. So in general, I think this is definitely the type of event that is going to incentivize going after Leia very quickly. And we will wrap it up. If you hear a cricket anywhere in this video, I did my best to take care of him. I had one shot at it and I mucked it up. He got away, and he's going right now if you can hear it in the background. But I will do my best to find him and eliminate him in the future. But thank you for watching. Be excellent to each other, everyone. This is Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes.